Hello, and welcome to the Dean's List, a podcast created by the Habersham School to help parents feel better connected to classical education and better prepared and equipped as parents. My name is Clay Hining, and I'll be your host for today's episode of the Dean's List. This is our very first episode, and I'm excited to welcome my colleague and coworker, my friend and fellow dean, the Dean of Academics, Brent Beaumont, to the studio. Brent, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Clay. It's great to be here.
It is good to be here. A little bit of trivia. We are sitting at the table that you used growing up in your home. I don't know how this table ended up at the Habersham School. Not really sure how it ended up in my office, but here we are in my office. And all of you that are listening today, we're glad that you've joined us. And our hope is that you would feel like you're sitting on the other side of the table. So you've just come to the Dean of Students office, and you're with the Dean of Academics as well. And we're going to have a conversation, some pretty big questions. But before that, Brent, how was your summer? Did you guys get to do anything fun? Have any crazy adventures?
Thanks, Clay. Yeah, we did have a good summer so far. Just actually last week, got back from a 3-week trip to England.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We spent the first week up in Yorkshire, which is kind of in the north of England. We've been having this tradition for a good number of years now, where my parents rent a house somewhere for all of us to stay at. So it's me and Katie and our kids, and it's my younger brother and his wife and kids, and my older brother and my parents. So this year my parents wanted to go to England. So they found a place up in Yorkshire, and we went over there and stayed in the house for a week, and we just kind of drove around Yorkshire, visited some different sites, and that was really a lot of fun. And Katie and I went off and we celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations on 20 years.
Thank you very
exciting.
much. Yeah, we did. We went to the Cotswolds, which is an area kind of more in the south of England, west of London. And we did what's known as a walking holiday, which it's really, not what we would consider a holiday, because you do a lot of walking. We walked 102 miles over the course of 9 days.
Wow.
We followed what's called the Cotswold Way, which is one of the national trails in England. It uses the existing network of footpaths and trails that are all throughout the countryside. And we walked from Chipping Campden in the north of the Cotswolds down to Bath, which is in the south of the Cotswolds. And we stayed at some different villages along the way, different pubs and B&Bs along the way. And that was it was strenuous, but it really was a lot of fun. We saw a lot of beautiful country, really just a kind of a bonding experience, honestly.
I bet.
Yeah.
That's a little more than 11 miles a day, right?
Yeah, it was. We had a few days that were like 15. Those were very difficult days. We had some lighter days that were like 7 or 8, which were nice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting highlights we saw along the way was we walked up on top of Cooper's Hill, which, probably doesn't mean anything to most people here in the States, but Cooper's Hill is the site of the annual cheese rolling competition. It's
the cheese rolling competition.
Yeah. So what it is, basically a bunch of people that are kind of crazy. Cooper's Hill is very steep. The average grade is about 50%.
Okay.
So it's like a 45-degree angle up this hill. And they start at the top of the hill and they basically race to the bottom of the hill. And while they're racing, they're chasing a wheel of cheese that's rolling down the hill. And whoever gets to the bottom of the hill first gets the wheel of cheese as their prize.
Do they eat it after it's rolled on the ground?
Oh yeah, they'll eat it. They wrap it up really well. They package it up.
Okay.
So the cheese is safe. The cheese actually has the safest journey down the hill because it's small and it rolls really well. The people, they fall over, they roll, they bounce, they break bones, they bruise themselves. It's pretty entertaining. But actually, if you're interested in the cheese rolling, you can watch. There's a little episode on a Netflix show called "We Are the Champions," and the first episode is about the cheese rolling event. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. It's one of those kind of unique old traditions in England that's The authorities have tried to shut down, and the people just keep it going year after year after year.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. We are actually recording this in the summer. It's going to come out right before school starts. So are you already ready for school to begin?
Oh gosh, probably not. Still some things to do. Still enjoying the slower pace of life that we enjoy in the summertime. So no, not quite ready for school to start. I'm sure that would be the same way for uh, most of the folks in our school community, trying to enjoy the much of the summer as they can. But I am excited, obviously, for the start of school. Always excited to see the students return,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to see the teachers get to work in the classroom. I'll be in the classroom myself as well, and that's always is a real energizing and life-giving time to be in the classroom with students. But we also enjoy the downtime as well.
All right. As we begin this school year, I would think many of you longtime parents might be asking, why are we creating a podcast? This is something new. This is something exciting. I'm pretty excited about this podcast. And here's what we're hoping to do. We want to provide more resources for our parents. We really mean it when we say we want to partner with you. And what the Habersham School does is distinct and different from progressive education. We're a different kind of school than all the ones around us. And so we want to give you resources to help understand what makes us distinct, what makes us different, what makes us special. It's also very difficult to parent well. And we want to partner with parents in that good work of parenting. So our episode today, this first episode, a couple of big questions that we want to tackle, or we're going to attempt to tackle. We're going to just ask, what is classical education? What is it about classical education that is different than maybe what we would expect? And really what we want to talk about is, why would parents choose classical Christian education for their family and for their children? Now, those two questions, we're going to have a guest join us in just a little bit. His name is Howe Whitman, and Howe is a leader of a school in Princeton, New Jersey. He's actually the founder, and he's been the head of school there for a little over 2 decades. And the reason he's going to join us is I wanted our Habersham community to hear a leader from another classical Christian school in a completely different part of the country talk about what classical education is and how it's been a blessing to his family, how it's been a blessing to his community there in Princeton, New Jersey. But before Hal joins us, I have another monster question. And Brent, you're really here to tackle that one. So
Okay.
I want to hear you talk about the Habersham mission statement. What is our school's mission statement? Why does the Habersham School exist? What is behind all that we're doing? Brent?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Clay. It's a really good question. It's a big question. And it's an important question, right? To know why we exist and why are we here. So our mission statement, we can start there. We say that we at the Habersham School exist to partner with God as his servants in seeking the restoration of his image in our students through education. So I'll say that one more time. Our mission is that we exist to partner with God as his servants in seeking the restoration of his image in our students through education.
Wow. I think we could probably have a whole podcast series just about that mission statement, at least 5 or 6 episodes. There's so much to talk about. So let me ask you this. Which part of the mission statement resonates with you most? And maybe I should say, which part of the mission statement resonates the most with you today? Because it could be different in different seasons of your life. And if you are a prospective parent, that's a common question we ask in our parent interviews. Is we'll share this mission statement, and then we'll just ask the mom and dad, what part of that statement is meaningful to you? So what about you, Brent? What part of that mission statement today resonates with you?
Yeah, well, I think what stands out to me, right, in the mission statement is the language about restoring the image of God in our students. I think that any kind of educational project is going to be motivated by what we think the human person is, right? Who do we think our students are? What is uniquely true about them that we're here to serve, right? And so, really, every education is motivated by some kind of anthropology, and ours is motivated by the understanding that our students are image bearers of God. right? That's really the most important thing that we have to keep in mind on a day-to-day basis, is that we are here to educate image bearers of God, right? That's what God wants for them. He wants for them to bear his image, right, in their lives, and that we exist to come alongside the fleshing out, right, the development, the restoration of that image in our students. So yeah, that's really what sticks out to me.
Wonderful. I'm going to put in the show notes a link to an article that is on Andy Crouch's website. And Andy Crouch wrote this article a couple of years ago. He's the author of The Techwise Family and several other important kind of culture-ish books. This article, he titled it The Three Callings of a Christian. And he says the first calling is to bear the image of God. The second calling is to restore the image of God wherever you go. And then his third calling is the contingent calling, which he's like, that's just your vocation or job. And he doesn't spend much time talking about that, which is ironic for our culture, because we're in a culture that is super obsessed with what do you do for a living? If we were just meeting, that would probably be one of the first questions we would ask each other. What do you do for a job? And we use that as a lens to try to understand who people are. And Andy Crouch makes the argument. He says, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you get those first two callings right. So if you're focused on bearing the image of God well, and if you're focused on wherever you go, wherever you find yourself, restoring that image of God in different places and in different people, then it really doesn't matter what you do for a living. So in, I guess, educational terms, what I would say is our students from pre-K 4, so 4-year-olds, all the way up to 12th grade, 18-year-olds, these are human beings. And we believe that each student is a unique human created by the Lord, a unique image bearer. They are not brains on a stick. They are not containers that we are just stuffing information into, right? They're humans, and we're working on that restorative process. We believe that education is a pathway of Christian discipleship. So we aren't just working at the Habersham School to get students into college. That isn't the main goal. But let me ask you, Brent, our students, do they still go to college?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of our students go off to college. The majority of them go off and complete, 4-year degree programs at colleges and universities around the country. Obviously a lot in the state of Georgia and the Southeast, but really students go a variety of places around the country.
Yeah, and your son's about to start his second year.
Yeah, that's right.
At Wheaton.
At Wheaton College, which is just outside of Chicago, Illinois.
My daughter's about to start her freshman year at Berry College, which is in North Georgia. So both excellent institutions, both graduates of the Habersham School. No problem getting into college.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier about the three callings is really important. I mean, that really gets at what I think resonates with me about our mission. I think in a lot of educational environments today, whether it be, secondary schools or colleges and universities, you'll hear a lot about, career readiness, right? Getting ready for the workforce, figuring out, pursuing a degree or a path of study that's going to prepare you for some kind of job. And I think that says a lot about how we think about human beings in our particular cultural context. I do think we think about them primarily, maybe primarily as workers, right? People that work, that produce in the kind of the workforce of our society. And while work is certainly fundamental to who we are as humans, because we see that even in Scripture, right? God creates Adam and Eve, and He puts them in a garden, and He commands them to work, right? To work the garden. But the work is motivated not simply for its own sake, right? They work because they're made in God's image, and it's who He made them to be. It's part of their of who they are. It's part of their humanity to work, but it's not the only aspect of their humanity, right? He also made them to worship Him. He made them to create things, and He made them to be in relationship with each other, right? And to love each other, and to have children, and to cultivate a family. There's lots of things that God called them to do. Work is just part of it. And so we want to really step back and see our students as, all the aspects of their humanity, and how can we as a school really work to develop, right, to restore all those aspects of their humanity, right? Their social life, their spiritual life, their creativity in the arts and music, right? Their analytical abilities that we develop, of course, in mathematics and science, um, their empathy, which we often develop through the humanities, right? As you read stories about different kinds of people, you learn a lot about the human condition, right? About your own self, but also about other people. You become a more empathetic person, right? Someone who is sees other people, right, in their situation for who they are, and wants to come alongside them, right, to serve them. That's really what we want for our students. We really want them, honestly, to fulfill, right, the two great commandments that Jesus talks about, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you do those two things, right, you are a human person. You're a human being bearing God's image. How you do those things, what kind of vocation you pursue, is like Andy Crouch said, a contingency, right? It's just the mechanism, the place in which you flesh that out. But it's not the only place you flesh it out, right? You do it in all aspects of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, all of those out there who are listening to this podcast, you can obviously tell why Brent Beaumont is one of our students' favorite teachers of all time. You can tell why our faculty love to have him as the Dean of Academics. So, Brent, thank you so much for sharing some of your knowledge about our Habersham mission. And in just a few moments, we're going to bring Howe Whitman in, and we're excited to talk to him. So we'll be back in just a moment with Howe. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Clay.
All right, we're back, and I'm very excited to have our very first guest on the Dean's List podcast. I'd like to welcome Howe Whitman, all the way from Princeton, New Jersey. Howe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me as your first guest. It's a privilege.
Yeah, we're excited. I want to tell our audience a little bit about who you are. You've been married to Brenda for 30 years. Congratulations. All four of your kids went to the Wilberforce School, which is the classical Christian school that you founded. You've been the head of school there for, a little over 2 decades, I think. And then they all went to college. I think 3 of them went to UVA. Is that right?
3 was UVA and 1 went to Washington Lee. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right.
Through Wilberforce from kindergarten.
Wow. Well, you're here today. We've invited you here to answer some pretty big questions about classical Christian education. Before we jump into those questions, I have some icebreaker questions, just because I want our audience to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. I want to know, and there's no judgment here, this is just for fun, what music have you been listening to in the past few weeks? Maybe it's on Spotify, maybe it's on your turntable record player, maybe it's in the car. Who has your ear? Brent, let's go with you first. Who have you been listening to?
Gosh, I haven't honestly been listening to a lot of music lately because we were just traveling. I find that I don't really listen to music like through headphones very often. I mostly listen to music in the car, and we just weren't in the car too much. But I think while we were traveling, some of the folks my family was getting ready to go see Hamilton down in London. So I did listen to all of Hamilton through that, which was, I've listened to it before, but it was interesting to hear it again.
Yeah.
And just kind of think about the history that comes through that. It's not my ideal kind of music. I probably tend to listen to a lot more kind of like alt country, folk kind of music. One of my go-tos is a guy named Coulter Wall, who's he's kind of a Canadian cowboy, sings a lot about the West. And so that would be, if I decided I wanted to kind of relax on an evening, that's probably what I'd put on, is something like Coulter Wall.
Yeah, rap music isn't traditionally your style. You introduced me to Gregory Alan Isaacoff not too long ago, and that's great music. Hal, what about you? What have you been listening to?
Well, Brett, you're exposing my musical taste to be much less elevated than yours. I have two things. One, when I'm paying bills or doing taxes or some tasks like that, I find I need something like the B-52s or 80s one-hit wonders or classic rock, something ridiculous that sort of parallels, the tax code, something like that. So that I have been indulging in a little bit in the background. However, more edifying in the car. I love the music of Rich Mullins. I don't know if you all, this generation, has discovered him, but he's a wonderful Christian, uh, really folk singer, and just his lyrics are so edifying. He plays the dulcimer as well as other instruments. So I love Rich Mullins and heartily recommend him. Not necessarily at B-52s or 80s.
Well, Hal, you're speaking my musical love language. Rich Mullins and Andrew Peterson are my two favorite singer-songwriters of all time. When I was in high school, I had it was on CD. It was a liturgy, a legacy, and a ragamuffin band. And I listened to that album all the time, wore out that CD. And the interesting thing is, when I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't know what liturgy meant. And the ironic thing is, I listened to it so much, I didn't know how it was shaping me. It was changing who I was listening to that music. And it wasn't until, gosh, I was probably 40 years old when I was like, oh, I understand what is happening with this album, what's happening with this music. And it's so rich. I mean, his name is Rich Mullins, but it's so rich theologically, so deep, so beautiful. I just absolutely love it. So that's my answer all the time. If you hop in the car with me, it's going to be Rich Mullins, Andrew Peterson, Andy Goldhorn, something like that. A few times I will listen to something like there's this song Augustana sings about the city of Boston, and it's just kind of like this ballad where you roll down the windows and sing really loudly. But most of the time I'm listening to Rich Mullins or Andrew Peterson. Okay, enough about music. I want to jump into classical Christian education. How you have a story that is compelling. And I say that for a number of reasons. One is this: your educational background, your personal education background is very impressive, very fancy. You're somebody that I like to brag on, like, hey, I know somebody who's gone to these premier schools, and it's just the best of the best. I would say that when you were in, your younger years, you went to the premier private school in Atlanta, Georgia. And then, I was asking you how you chose a college, and you were saying you really wanted to play football at the University of Georgia. And of course, I'm a Georgia Tech grad, so I won't hold that against you. But you discovered, sadly, that you probably weren't going to make the team there between the hedges. And so you ended up at Princeton University, went Ivy League. And I did a little bit of research on Princeton. It's, started in 1746. A couple of leaders at Princeton University, John Witherspoon, who signed the Declaration of Independence. Jonathan Edwards was the president of Princeton. We have some United States presidents who attended Princeton. James Madison. We have a house here at the Habersham School named after James Madison. But Woodrow Wilson graduated from Princeton. Just kind of an amazing place. I think I saw on the website that 54 Nobel Prize winners are connected to Princeton University, which is, just sounds ridiculous. Kind of sounds outrageous. But you didn't stop just at Princeton. Your graduate degree, you went to a business school that is, I would say, the most well-known business school in America, probably, regarded as the best. It's Wharton School of Business, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania. And notable people went there: Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, all kinds of people. You had the best of the best. So I want to know what happened that resulted in you starting a new school, a different kind of school, a classical Christian school in Princeton, New Jersey, which is a place already filled with lots of impressive schools, reputable schools. How did you end up discovering classical Christian education?
Well, we were young parents when we moved back to Princeton in 2002, and we had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And our 3-year-old, Hal, was going to preschool, just starting to dip his big toe into the school world. And, we just noticed as new parents that you could play something on the radio, a snippet of a song, maybe, one of those songs that is more lowbrow that I mentioned earlier. And they could then repeat it back, instantly. And it was a little scary. And you realize, wow, they are sponges, and we need to be careful, actually, what we put in front of them. And that really made us think about school and the teachers and the materials and the approach to education that they would have. And not just on the negative side, but a positive side. Like, what an opportunity when they are just taking in everything. And we would read Go Dog Go, and they'd memorize the whole book. And, as most parents, discover that, what an opportunity to be deliberate and intentional about what we actually give them. So we started to tour schools in the area, and Princeton, similar to the university, every kind of model of school is here. There's Waldorf and Quaker schools and prep schools and Montessori schools and so forth. So we toured them all, mostly my wife, and we developed simple criteria that we wanted. We wanted great materials for them to absorb, and we wanted to be thoroughly Christian in its approach to their character development, and their spiritual development. And we realized that those two things, you can't separate them. In other words, even if you wanted to say, oh, let's just do the intellectual development, 8 o'clock to 3, and let's do the spiritual and character development the rest of the time. You couldn't do that. It's happening together. And so we wanted integration of addressing their formation, not just between the ears, their intellectual formation, but their character formation and their spiritual formation. We wanted to be grounded in historic Christian Orthodox faith and practice. So that's what we were looking for. And there just wasn't anything in this area that was doing that. And so that's how we got launched on this journey to start a school.
Yeah. Yeah. I was hearing you even tell a story about your son. He was maybe 5 years old in kindergarten. And I think he had already noticed that there was a difference between what you guys were doing at church on the weekend and what he was experiencing at school during the week. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, he was at a Montessori school. I think he was 4 or 5 years old before we started the school. And he was talking to one of his buddies at school. And he told me, he said, Patrick says we should hate our enemies. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Well, how did you get into that conversation? And he talked a little bit. I said, so were you talking to him about the Bible, how it says we should love our enemies? And how the response was, sometimes I get my church plans and my school plans confused. And it was such a great expression from a 5-year-old, like his plans for church conversations and school conversations. And already there was this dualism. It was sort of like, we talk about these things at church and we talk about these things at school, and never the twain shall meet. These two streams don't meet. And it's weird if they do. And that's where we really recognize the need for integration. Like you're by excluding this whole realm of the character and spiritual life from the conversation at school, there's this myth of neutrality, but it actually is an exclusion of the most important things of life from that conversation. So that's where we sort of was clued us into the need for integration.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I was hearing you also talk about some of your studies at Princeton. Tell us, what was your what did you major in while you were there at Princeton?
Well, I was in the School of Public and International Affairs, public policy, essentially. And, the thing that I discovered, I mean, I had an insight at the end. I took a class that was on international theory of international relations, something like that. And for one of our assignments, we read a chapter in this this ancient Greek Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. And you're reading this chapter, and it's talking about the concepts that we're talking about in class for contemporary international relations and so forth, about alliances and how nations and interact with each other, compete. And I just thought to myself, I could have graduated from this prestigious place with all these Nobel Prize winners without ever having read anything before 1960, if I hadn't taken this one class.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, how could I have called myself educated? And I barely actually call myself educated now, because it used to be that you weren't educated unless you had actually read the greats, what was called the greats, that were the great thinkers of your discipline or just of general thinking through the ages. And what has happened is, and we could talk about why, but I think that's beyond the scope of it. But like around the turn of the century, in the progressive era, the early 1900s, the greats and the classical curriculum was just thrown out, essentially. And that's what I experienced in my education in the 70s and 80s, was a contemporary only curriculum that had thrown out a lot of what was considered to be must reads.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Hal. I remember I had a somewhat similar experience when I was in seminary, actually. I was studying theology and surrounded by a lot of, very kind of high level intellectual people. But a lot of the curriculum, honestly, a lot of the books that we interacted with were fairly contemporary, works of theology. But there was a few students that I kind of became close to. One in particular, who he had been classically educated, back when classical education was pretty new, but he had studied under George Grant in Nashville, Tennessee, and received this really rich education. And the more I interacted with him, the more I realized the depth of knowledge and just of the breadth of variety of texts that he had read and interacted with, and that he could pull upon kind of in his thoughts and his conversations, and just how it shaped him as a person and who he was. And it was different than everybody else, that had not received that kind of education. And I was so impressed with it, so kind of in all of it, that I went after seminary and kind of got my own classical education. I went to St. John's College and did their Great Books program, because I had not received anything like that. I'd done my undergrad in engineering, which was a highly technical, enterprise with very little dabbling in the humanities. And even in seminary, there was some discussion of these kind of ancient thinkers, but it was not what you would imagine it could have been. So yeah, I agree with you that there's something so rich about a classical education, the way it shapes you as a person, how you think, how you interact with other people. I was impressed with it, and kind of my eyes were opened as to the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for parents to realize, as they think about what classical Christian education is, that often there is an assumption that what is new is better. And I think that we all experience that in technology. I mean, that newer computers are better than older computers, and the newer technology with your dishwasher or whatever, whatever it is, your phone, technology improves over time, and there's progress. Okay, but there's an assumption that gets mapped over to education or to other things in life, and C.S. Lewis calls it chronological snobbery, is the name he gave for it, which is that everything that's new is better than what is old. And but we know that God never changes. We know that the nature of human beings as image bearers is unchanging, And there are some truths and that are true from generation to generation. And so classical education is the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. I think you were probably going to ask about this later, but like different ways of thinking about what classical Christian education is. It's time-tested learning. It is methods and materials that have stood the test of time, and it's the best of human thought through the ages. So if you have an elevator, just condensed description of what classical Christian education is, that those would be the three best little short formulations I could come up with. Time-tested learning is the shortest. Materials and methods that have stood the test of time are the best of human thought through the ages that you're giving to your children. And I was thinking about this. There's this great passage, Jeremiah 6:16. It says, "Thus says the Lord, stand by the roads and look, ask for the ancient paths where the good way is, and walk in it and find rest for your souls." So I think that contemporary biases towards the new, and there's certainly valuable things that are new, but I think that classical education is trying to draw from things that are unchanging and timeless, and contributions that are, let's say that we talked about, like that ancient Greek philosopher talking about international relations, contributions that have been made that we have stood on their shoulders to reach. And so the value of exposing students to the best of human thought.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this great little, talking about how our culture just favors the new all the time. There's a Wendell Berry essay, a really short one, that he wrote I want to say in the 80s or 90s. I mean, it's kind of dated now, but the title is Why I'm Not Going to Buy a Computer. And he is resisting the pressure to be contemporary, to move into this kind of technological world that we're living in. And he's making an argument. He's listing the reasons why he's never going to buy a computer. And he says that he's been told that if he were to use a computer, it would make his writing better. And he responds and says, will it make it better than Dante? Like if you can show me something written with a computer that's demonstrably better than that, then maybe I'll use one. And he says, he kind of pokes fun at us loving the new idea. He says, if using a computer is a new idea, then not using a computer is an even newer idea, which I really appreciated about him. I mean, just the things you were just saying is going to answer the question I'm about to ask you. But, part of this podcast that we're doing, it's called The Dean's List. We want it to be about classical Christian education. We want to give our parents resources to help understand what's distinct and different about what the Habersham School is doing. We also want to give them great resources on how to parent. There's so much information and misinformation out there. And we want to, in partnering with our parents, we want to give them solid, good things to think about. And so here's the question. Why should a classical Christian education be what parents are desiring for their children, whether they live in Princeton, New Jersey, Savannah, Georgia, no matter where they are in the country or in the world? Why should a classical Christian education be what they're hoping for their children?
Well, one of the reasons is that there were very valuable methods and materials that were thrown out that are worth recovering. Let me give you an example. When I was learning how to read in the 70s, there was a trend in education that was called whole language learning. And it was really not a great way to learn how to read. And I really struggled with reading. I still struggle with reading. And there were that education is very trendy, and schools and school systems tend to jump on trends, partly because they're afraid of being left behind. And I think that when we started the school or in the 2000s, the iPad and the Chromebook came out, and every school is adopting Chromebooks. And what a classical school does is say, we are going to use technology selectively when it's proven to enhance instruction. We're not we're not eschewing and putting off all forms of technology all the time, but we're just saying we're not going to jump on a trend just because we're afraid of being left behind. We're gonna use time-tested methods of learning. So that applies to reading as well, to get back to that. Phonics and phonemic awareness is just a better way to learn reading, and a proven way to learn reading, for especially for all students, but especially those who are struggling. So we are, and just to finish the story, with the Chromebooks, with all these schools that adopted Chromebooks, lots of them have decided not to use them anymore because they're so distracting for students. So that is a hallmark of a classical school, is that we're going to use time-tested methods and materials and not jump on every educational trend or every ed tech trend.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly right. We want our students to have beautiful things, and like you said, time-tested things that have existed for ages. And yeah, it is kind of surprising how quickly, and for whatever reason in my mind, I'm picturing the people of Israel. They have left Egypt, and Moses has gone up on the mountain, and how quickly they just went back to idols. You know, they made a golden calf, and I think that's technology for us in a big way. Is that golden calf? We're replacing what's true and tested and proven with what is convenient, or what kind of catches our eye or glimmers the right way.
Yeah, and I would just say something about AI. I mean, I know that AI is a great tool, and I think all of us adults are using it and learning how to use it and so forth. And I think that as students get older, there are times in their assignments and so forth where they need to learn how to use it. But we should be clear about that the mere transfer of data from a computer to an assignment, or to your child's thinking, is not constitute learning.
Mm.
That we value students actually learning to independently work through a calculus problem, or work through developing a thesis and supporting their claims in an essay. And those are important, and even learning proper grammar so that they can, as colleges, actually move back to blue books, because they can't monitor cheating without doing that. You actually have to have your own grammar and spelling be correct, as you're right. So we're interested in what happens between the child's own ears and in their own heart, and to develop them. And certainly AI can be an aid and for research, or for all sorts of things. But what they need, was lacking, is discernment and the ability to check the machine, or of someone else's claims, and to be able to think for themselves. So we're not Luddites. We're not against technology and its use, but we want it to be a tool that we use, and we want to be able to be the humans who are in charge of it, rather than it driving us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We say it all the time here at the Habersham School. The one who does the thinking is the one who does the learning. And so, yeah, you're cheating yourself if you just type that calculus problem into your Google search bar. And I'm part of me is like super amazed that you can do that, and it does find the correct answer a good bit of the time. But it's so much better to go run around the block yourself, right? It's so much better. Don't just look at the box with the jigsaw picture on it. Do the work of putting the pieces together yourself. It is, that is where the learning happens, is when you struggle through the puzzle. So along those lines, Hal, I want to ask you, do you have any advice for our Habersham parents as they begin a new school year? How do they make the most of a classical Christian education in the home? So I guess the question is, instead of just using AI to solve your calculus problems and actually struggling through the theorems and the steps, how can you model that in the home? How could parents do the same thing, kind of removing the reliance on machine, and allow their children to develop virtue and and discipline and skill? How can they do that in the home to partner with a classical Christian school?
I love that question, and I really think that back to school is a great time to think about and think about a reset. Like how do we want to reset things for this coming year? And I think that if you think about what is happening is formation of your child. Your child is forming, and so what patterns and habits in your home are going to shape your child's thinking and their character and their virtue and their spiritual life. And what are things that are intervening in that, or habits that are kind of encroaching on some of those goals that you have. So I think you could think for just 30 seconds, you probably have things in your mind already what they are. But I think that what I think that technology and the phone is crowding out other activities that are so important for children to develop habits and so forth. So, for an example, I think the greatest thing to do, activity to do with your child, is to read out loud.
Mm.
And you do it. I just did it with my 25-year-old daughter. We were just reading The Wind in the Willows. She was sick, and we were just reading it for an hour at a time. It never gets old. It is never not a redemptive and edifying activity. And when your children are little, it's wonderful cuddle time to just be with them and to spend time with them, to read great stories. And there's so many wonderful things that are happening when you're reading out loud with your child. You're bonding with them. It's relational. You're building a relationship, and you're building memories around those books and those stories that you come back to. You are actually, if you're thinking about the intellectual and the developmental side, they're developing a love for words and stories. And just there's this warm feeling when you read a book together that's so pleasurable, like The Hobbit, or uh, Laura Ingalls Wilder, the Little House on the Prairie series, or Anne of Green Gables, or the Lord of the Rings, or C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia. You just have this warm feeling together, and this associations with stories and words, and they begin to love reading and stories. And it gives them an almost unfair advantage if they learn to love reading early on.
Mm.
So that is just the most no-brainer activity that you can do. And it also, you're putting aside the phone and other distractions, and all that goes away. And you're just there with your child or children, reading it. Now, I don't want to paint a picture of bliss and so forth, because it's chaotic. We had 4 children. We know sometimes one child would be locked on, and another child or 2 would be rolling around on the floor, running around. I get it. I'm not trying to say that it's idyllic all the time and so forth, but some of the greatest times I had with my children were reading those book series together.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, when you talk about it, it sounds just beautiful and wonderful, and then all of a sudden I'm picturing like Andy and Opie and Aunt B on the front porch, and Andy's playing the guitar and they're singing a song, and I start to think that is impossible, in the year
It rarely works
2026.
out that way. It rarely works out that way. Someone's going to yell, and there's going to be a fire in the kitchen, or there's somebody needs help in another room. But it's worth working through that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I read, and you're friends with this guy, Justin Whitmel Early, in his book, Habits of the Household. He repeatedly says in there, doing something is better than doing nothing. So if we're convinced that it's impossible, we've already lost. But if we're willing to struggle through it with one kid, like you said, rolling around on the floor with the laundry timer still buzzing and folding clothes while you're, reading or whatever it is between basketball practice and volleyball practice, like just do something, and you'll start to form those memories and build that virtue. Howe, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, for talking about classical Christian education. Thank you to the Wilberforce School Karen and I got to go visit you guys back in the winter. And that's part of why we're starting this podcast is the conversations we had with you. You've been so generous and kind and gracious to spend your time with us and allow us to come visit the campus. So keep up the good work. You are inspiring our community. You're inspiring us. So thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thanks, Clay and Brett. It's a joy to be with you. And I will say one last thing. You mentioned Justin early. Uh, I was in the digital age, in the age of distraction. There's so much to process and think about what to do, and all these books come out. Justin has read all the books, and if you just save time and go, he has this website called hangtenmovement dot something, and if you're thinking about a reset, thinking about getting started for the school year, it's a great list to go through. And I heartily recommend it because he's digested so much and he's lived it with he's got a large family as well with young kids. So I recommend that. But thank you for having me. It's a joy. And I would love to come and visit Habersham School. I appreciate what you're doing. Keep doing it. And if I can help in any way, I'd love to help.
Yep. And you have to come visit. You told us you've never, you grew up in Atlanta, but you've never visited Savannah, Georgia.
Never been to Savannah. Yeah, I got to come.
So you got to come walk through Forsyth Park, walk down River Street. We'll take you to the Shaver's bookstore and maybe even some Leopold's ice cream. Although I don't want to get in trouble, but I think Leopold is a little overrated. The line's just a little too long for what you get. Or as our principal would say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So. Anyway, thank you so much, Hal, and we hope to talk to you on the podcast again sometime in the future.
Good to be with you, Clay and Brett.
Thanks, Hal.
All right. I'm so thankful that Hal was able to join us today. Brent, what did you hear Hal talk about in regards to classical Christian education and parenting? What's one thing that he said that inspired you?
Yeah, I think he was talking a little bit about the contrast between classical Christian schools and kind of what we might call kind of modern or progressive education. That in education, especially modern progressive education, tends to follow trends, right? New trends emerge, schools go down the road with the new trend, then kind of see the faults in that trend and then try something else, right, in its place. And that classical Christian schools, because of their philosophy, and because of that, it's rooted in this time-tested tradition and in time-tested content, just really kind of naturally resist following those trends. And I think maybe, I was thinking about that as a parent. Like if you're a parent of a student at a classical Christian school, maybe there is some comfort in that, knowing that the school is going to continue to do what it does, and every year after year after year, right? The curriculum is going to stay fairly stable and static because it's really a timeless curriculum. It's a time-tested curriculum. It's not one that's looking for the newest trend to improve and do better what it's trying to do, but instead is really leaning into a tradition that is much older and has much more depth and stability to it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we wrap up today, Brent, I wanted to ask you to close us in prayer, close out this first episode in prayer. And we have a certain prayer. I call it our school prayer. It's not the official school prayer. I don't think we have anything dubbed or titled the official school prayer, but this is one by Thomas Aquinas that we use frequently for different events, different things with our students. And if you would, just read that prayer for us as we close out.
Sure. Let us pray. Give me, O Lord, a steadfast heart, which no unworthy thought can drag down, an unconquered heart, which no tribulation can wear out, an upright heart, which no unworthy purpose can tempt aside. Bestow upon me understanding to know you, diligence to seek you, wisdom to find you, and faithfulness that finally may embrace you. Amen.
Thank you again, Brent, for being our very first co-host on the Dean's List. And I want to say thank you one more time to Howe Whitman, and thank you to the Wilberforce School for the great work they're doing and the time that they shared with us. The Dean's List is a podcast produced by Clay Hining with content assistance from a creative team at the Habersham School. The lovely Paul Uden piano music is royalty-free through Pixabay. Graphics for the YouTube version of this podcast were created by Mary Cameron Childs. A huge thank you to Brad Warren and Michael Hester at Christ in Youth, along with Jenna Axelson at the Wilberforce School, for each taking so much time to teach me about podcast process and sharing their technical expertise with me. We hope that all of you listening will like and subscribe to the Dean's List podcast wherever you're listening. If you have any comments or questions, you can email us at podcast@thehabershamschool.org. That's podcast@thehabershamschool.org. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Dean's List.